most Orient countries do. I'm a medical doctor for 23 years now. I just turned 48 years ago, 4 days ago. And I've only been involved in alternative medicine. Of course, I studied medical school in a university and I did my internship, but I have never been spoiled by any regular indoctrination. Since 2000, I'm a clinical metal toxicologist, so I pretend to know everything about toxic metals and the influence on the human body. You can follow us on several websites. As Dr. Mitsuo this morning told, I'm also a board member of IBCMT. I have to disagree that the teaching course we give is very difficult. In fact, it's not. It's momentarily online, and also the examination nowadays is performed online so that people don't have to spend expensive trips and conferences to follow. In January of next year, we will launch a new website called True Health Medical School, in which we will highlight in 8 to 9 lectures everything there is to know regarding the spectrophotometrical analysis. It's a complete course of about 9 to 10 hours in which all trace elements and toxic metals are explained. I will show you in this lecture about 3 to 4 hours. I think we take 2 breaks. I will highlight a lot of these issues which are addressed during the teaching course. But you want to know a little bit about pathologies as well. So I had to make a 163-slide presentation involving the trace elements and toxic metals ranging from skin to brain. So let's skip the person. I give a lot of lectures worldwide. Why? Because metals are just involved in any physiological process. There is not any individual plant, whether animal or human on Earth, which nowadays is not involved or intoxicated to some extent by any of these metals. I'm not the author of the book, which is shown here, of clinical metal toxicology, as Dr. Mitsuo said this morning, but I am a contributing author of the book. It is written by Dr. B.J. Vandershar. He is an 88-year-old physician. I have the opportunity and the luck to work for him since 23 years. He is a former thoracic surgeon who brought chelation therapy to Europe. He did operations, bypass surgery in Houston in the 80s, etc. And there he learned about chelation therapy, and that he brought to Europe. Since 2000, he has accumulated a lot of literature and experience, which is now conveyed in this textbook about clinical metal toxicology. It's a over 600 A4 pages teaching book in 2 volumes. The price is exactly 100 euros, would be about 10,000 yen, I have gathered. So let's go to the course of today, toxic metals and neurodegeneration. What I want to do is to take you on a kind of journey of our view regarding human illness and how it is one approach, it's not the approach, but one approach of treating patients. Therefore, I will give you my outline on all chronic disease. There is a trias involved. The T for toxins, the I for inflammation, and the S for stress. There is nothing more than that, and I can prove it to you. Therefore, I need to explain a little bit about the inflasome. What I already thought many years ago, that toxins and inflammation, this is sterile. This is, of course, non-sterile. But these are just conveying to one common pathway which causes cellular dysfunction. I will show you how. Of course, I will talk a little bit about radicalization. Many people know the oxygen and the nitrogen stress radicals, but there are also carbonyl and sulfonyl or sulfur species. And if you would only take home one supplement, whether one natural substance inside your cell, then just remember the name of glutathione. I will prove you why. Further in the lecture, I will discuss the relationship of immunity and degeneration or neurodegeneration in general. I will show you diagnostics and a therapeutic plan, because sometimes fat is good and sometimes dope is good. At least I'm from the Netherlands, so we know a lot about dope, but in this regard I mean dopamine. And we now have a new supplement which can stop the progression of Parkinson's disease and probably other neurodegenerative diseases as well. Here's my view on the human. We are born with a certain package of DNA that we cannot change. If you're born like the first wife of Paul McCartney, she was a converted vegetarian or veganist, but she died of very massive breast cancer at the age of 47. She did not have the good genes. We had once a young girl, 14 years of age, with multiple sclerosis. MS is always mercury. It's a mercury disease. MS did not exist before the age of 1830. Then amalgam was introduced. The first woman who got MS was a lady in Paris, a rich woman, who got 1.5 years before the first amalgam filling. So I thought when I saw that 14-year-old girl, this is mercury. I look in the mouth, I saw 0 fillings. So I almost fell off my belief. I had to do some other research, and then we checked by advice of other doctors worldwide, check her enzymes for detoxification, the GST enzymes, glutathione S transferases. And the girl had none. So we did a provocation test in her, and she had a tremendous amount of mercury. So we did, again, a better questionnaire, and since the age of 8, she was a convinced vegetarian. We call it pisco-vegetarian because she didn't eat meat, but she did eat fish, and almost every day. And without the possibility of excreting the mercury, she accumulated in such a way that already at the age of 14, she started to develop the autoimmunity. Just to highlight that we can do a lot about nutrition and supplements and detox, but when the DNA package is not good, you have a major problem. The second issue you should address before you start treating any patient is his posture. And I don't mean only the posture as I am standing here now, but also the mental posture. It's very important in that regard. But I will tell you during the lecture my personal medical history, in which the spine in itself is very important to watch. But given these two, because you are born with a body, with DNA, given these two things, then we are only bothered by 3 more subjects. First, pathogens. You can name anyone: fungus, parasite, virus, bacteria, mycoplasmas. We are bothered by toxins. I call them the non-living molecules. And we are bothered by which I call in a common denominator the psyche. But you can mention there also all radiation we get from the sun or from 4G radiation from the cell phones. Whatever you cannot measure with toxins or pathogens, I call the psyche. So we can influence that naturally by antibiotics, preferentially natural ones. We do that with chelation, both synthetic but also natural ones. I will show you the most potent ones today. And we can influence the psyche also physically because the brain is at least an organ. And we can influence that with bioidentical hormones, but also with neurotransmitters, precursors. That's our view on chronic disease. So what I tell my patients always is that we need to deflame. Of course, when you have inflammation, you need to deflame. But when you have toxicity, you need to detox. And most of the people in the Netherlands, they are all very stressed. We have to. Even children have a schedule. We go to school, we come home, we have to go to dinner, we have to go to sports, we have a sleeping over party there and there. Everybody must so much nowadays. So I always tell people as well, first week, try to deactivate, because your brain is so overloaded with commands that you also need a break there. And in that sense, stress has influence. It's not stress just by the husband or your wife or your children or your job, but also stress which is generated intracellularly. It has a direct influence on the amount of toxins you accumulate or you are able to detox, and also has an influence on the pathogens you acquire. These two are very interrelated, because who does not know the condition of candidiasis? I think everybody heard of that here as well. So why do have people an overgrowth of Candida albicans? Everybody has Candida albicans in his gut. But why do some people have an overgrowth? Because it has a function. The function is namely that Candida, as a fungus, can accumulate toxins. So when you have the sign of candidiasis, you are just over-accumulated with toxins. And it is not only cadmium or lead, but also many other non-easy detectable toxins. So many naturopaths then detect this, and they're going to try caprylic acid or something else in a massive dose to kill the candida. And all of those patients complain afterwards of severe side effects, which is very logical, because you kill the candida, but you release the toxins. So if you do any treatment against pathogens, you need also to do a treatment against toxins, and vice versa. Because Epstein-Barr Pfeiffer can grow on a mercury-loaded mitochondria, so you can treat the Epstein-Barr, but if you don't treat the mercury, then it's a ping pong. You won't have the most benefit for your patient. And it all conveys now together in what they call the inflammasome. I did not invent this, it's just new literature. The inflammasome is the common pathway to cellular dysfunction, and please do not be afraid of the next slide. It might seem a little complicated, but it is not. It is not. Here you see a cell, for instance, an immune cell. And a lot of things are happening, but just remember a few concepts. One of those is PAMP, pathogen-associated molecular pattern. So these come from pathogens. And it can be a substance like hemolysin, which is produced by certain pathogens, which causes pores in the cell membrane. That's detrimental for the cell, so it starts to counter-react to that. But it can also be DNA from a virus or from a bacteria. It doesn't matter. It can even be our commensal microbiota, because we have a lecture in metabolic syndrome, and there we explain that metabolic syndrome is caused, the inflammation is caused by our own good microbiota. Of course, due to dietary problems, but it's the own microbiota which causes the liver to inflame, which causes the metabolic syndrome to arise. If microbiota enter the bloodstream, they are just treated as common pathogens. In the gut, they are healthy. Inside our system, they are very detrimental. And all can cause these, the chain reaction of interleukin and interferon being produced. But next to the pumps, you also have dumps. So you have pathogen, but also damage-associated molecular patterns. These are not arising from pathogens. They are just common substances which are just molecules which activate our cells in an immune reaction. And here you see aluminum salts. Just plain aluminum can directly activate the whole inflammatory cascade. And aluminum, I will address it later as well, is such a big problem, and especially here in Tokyo, I see it in our neighborhood in Amsterdam. I live 200 kilometers away from that, fortunately. In our region, we don't see much of aluminum, but everybody in a major city with major airports have high aluminum, because air traffic control sprays in high sky an aluminum field, tons every year, because it can attract very potently water. One aluminum ion or molecule binds 6 molecules of water. So they spray it as to influence weather. And around airports, it rains much less significantly than in the rest of our country. So whether you avoid aluminum cooking utensils or deodorants or whatever what, if you live in a neighborhood where they spray it, you just inhale it. It's very simple. You cannot bypass it. You cannot prevent absorption. The only thing you can do is to increase elimination. But next to aluminum, also asbestos is a DAMP, causes damage and therefore inflammation. But here, look also, palmitate. I don't make this up. It's common literature. Palmitate is its normal fat, which can be found in food. It's a saturated fat, but in too high amounts, it directly influences the inflammasome. Therefore, we know that full saturated fats or trans fats are very bad for our health. Now we see what is the common denominator. And here's another one, cholesterol crystals. I think here in Japan, everybody knows that it's not cholesterol which causes cardiovascular disease. That's just a hype. But when the cholesterol is oxidized and crystallizes, that's a major problem. That causes the inflammasome to be activated. So don't treat hypercholesterolemia, because many patients on cholesterol-lowering drugs die from massive cardiovascular disease. But it is the oxidized form which is very detrimental. And nowadays, many laboratories can easily measure these things. So aluminum, microbiota, we addressed. Here, I will talk about it in a few minutes. Cadmium and nickel can directly activate a certain type of receptor. They call that TLR4, means toll-like receptor type 4. It's also where the blood sugar metabolism has to do, it's associated with that. But these metals can directly activate these receptors, therefore causing the cascade which leads to inflammation. You don't need a pathogen to be in hyperinflammatory state. A toxin can just do as well. And remember this one. In a cell which is under stress, so it produces many radicals, because that is what happens during cellular stress, then calcium intracellularly rises. And I will show you many of those photospectrometrical analysis, what they call the Oligoscan, how it is easy detectable in that profile. So toxic metals. They negatively influence our health in several ways. One is pro-oxidation, known to everybody. We have oxygen species, shown here, the superoxide anion, and here the hydroxyl radical. We have nitrogen species, and this is not exhaustive. There are many more than that, but the most common ones. Here we have the nitric oxide, and here the peroxynitrate. We have also carbon species, because when you measure with a device which can measure the ages, the advanced glycation end products, these are derived from carbon species. And you have a few like methylglyoxan and glucosone, and there are many more, deoxyglucosone. And there are also, that's new research, there are also many sulfur species. And what does this all convey to? You can make one radical scheme to show all of them. Here we have oxygen. It gives life, it takes life. Because oxygen can easily take up one electron by inflammation, ischemia, all of these enzymes, that's all mitochondria, or inflammation, lipoxygenase, many liver detoxifying enzymes, and of course the mitochondria themselves, especially when they age, they produce a lot of superoxide anion. Fortunately, life has given us a few enzymes to counteract that. These are called azodase superoxide dismutases. They are dependent on 4 trace elements. Very strange in plant or in lower animals that nickel is also involved, but let's forget it and consider nickel a toxic one. But manganese, zinc, copper, and iron. And as you have shown this morning, a few of the doctors, many, especially women, are zinc deficient. So there's a big chance that one of these enzymes, which is zinc dependent, might be in hypofunction as well. So if you are in hypofunction of one of these enzymes, this could accumulate. If not, then your body starts to produce hydrogen peroxide, which is not a radical in essence, because it does not have a free electron, but it can turn into a radical one very quickly. How? For instance, our white blood cells, with selenium, they produce hypochlorite. It's just to kill bacteria. Hypochlorite is toxic for bacteria. The cell membrane is disrupted, so the cell dies immediately. But it is selenium dependent. Also, through the Fenton reaction, if you have too much of copper, iron, or any toxic metal, or any transition metal, then through the Fenton reaction, it is very easily hydroxyl radical produced. And for this radical, we don't have natural defenses. There is not an enzyme which can counteract this. This will cost you a cell membrane molecule, this will cost you an omega-3, it will cost you any other structure or a vitamin C molecule if you have enough, which is not regenerated, by the way. But there is another way of detoxifying hydrogen peroxide to just plain oxygen again, and that is if you have the enzyme catalase. And it's iron dependent, so now you can understand why many people with iron deficiency not only have trouble in increased amounts of toxic metals, but they also have a decreased capacity to detox free radicals. And there was another one, which is also selenium dependent, and that is called glutathione peroxidase. This is the most crucial one, because it uses glutathione. And I told you, just remember one name after this lecture, and it is glutathione. If you have enough of this substance, the reduced form of glutathione, then you are capable of neutralizing free radicals most efficiently. It produces the oxidized form that is in itself not detrimental, needs to be regenerated, but we will come to that. So this is the first part of the slide. Now we get a second part. So here we have the toxins which can generate superoxide, but inflammation, the pathogens or the immune system, will generate the nitric oxide molecule through the conversion of L-arginine. So just a simple amino acid. And the type 1 M1 macrophage produces this reaction. And you will say, well, I've read a lot of literature which claims that nitric oxide is very healthy for the body. Yes, that is true, but only in healthy people. But in sick people, like for instance diabetics produce high amounts of superoxide anion. If they produce also nitric oxide, they have the combination together, and that is peroxynitrate. And peroxynitrate, it's not a radical, just like this one, but it can become a radical again, and it can be active for more than 10 seconds. So it's not very radical in that sense. But the problem with peroxynitrate is many of our problems arise here. Many people say all disease arises in the gut. We say all diseases arises in the mouth. And it's not only the problem of the dentist, it's also our own problem of choosing the food we want to use. But when you have, for instance, a dead tooth, which is the most worst condition you can have for your body, it produces a toxin which is produced when a dead human body will decompose. It's called mercaptane. And it slowly produces these, and then peroxynitrate is produced, and that can stay active for 10 seconds. This one dead tooth, which produces radicals, can traverse in 10 seconds. The complete circulation is you have a complete cycle of circulation. So any radical or this substance formed can then cause problems on distance. And that is what we can see with the meridians. If you have a tooth which correlates to your colon, you produce toxins here. That's how it is explainable that people with chronic infections here, when that exists for more than 10 or 20 years, can have colonic disease. When it correlates, your wisdom teeth correlate with heart, they almost degenerate the first because they are so difficultly located, etc. And when you don't have them removed before the age of 56, you have a big chance of developing cardiovascular disease. It's all due to the production of toxins produced localized. And peroxynitrate, this is just common literature, it generates more radicals, it generates the bad prostaglandins, it is directly cytotoxic, it can damage any structure on its way, whether proteins, lipids, anything. So it's the combination of toxins and inflammation which generates this molecule. Here you have the literature of peroxynitrate, that it is a combination of oxygen and nitrogen species. It is involved in damaging DNA, enzymes, cell membranes, and it is involved in cancer, neurodegeneration, stroke, inflammatory, in all chronic disease, period. And remember, it is simply produced by two radicals formed with any kind of intoxication and inflammation together. And that can be silent. Many people have silent inflammation. You just check the HSCRP, not the CRP, but check the HSCRP. If that is in the very low range, you are protected from major problems for the moment. Here, for instance, Parkinson's disease, one of the most common neurodegenerative diseases. What they did here, this is a Spanish doctor, he checked the nitrate level, what can be a product of nitrous stress, but also the peroxynitrate level, and see how significant, but also how much more these two nitrogen-dependent molecules are increased compared to non-Parkinsonian patients. Very obvious. And the problem is, now we come back to the scheme I had before. When you have a lot of this nitrous stress, what happens? Nitrogen and glutathione can combine. It's a multi-level reaction. I just simplified it here. But at the last, a molecule is produced called S of sulfur, nitrosoglutathione. And in itself, this substance is not so bad. It is the natural capacity for the body to store nitric oxide, because we cannot store that little molecule. It is gone before you know, has reacted with any structure, but this is a storage capacity. But as shown in the Parkinsonian patients, when the peroxynitrate level is tremendously increased, you rob the body of any glutathione. And when you don't have any glutathione left, this will accumulate because you cannot detoxify anymore. And therefore, the most potent radical is being produced constantly. And that eventually leads to the progression of neurodegeneration.